welcome to my YouTube channel. If you haven't been here before, welcome, and if you're back again, lovely to have you here. So, masking. Before I start, let's start at the beginning, sort of. Recently I had a conversation with my children. One of them said, "No offense, Mum, but you're not my benchmark. You and Dad are not my benchmark for a relationship." And I was like, I understand. And I didn't say this to them, but I was like, it's not my benchmark either. And another of my children was telling me that when they're in a relationship, they're going to do a better job. They're going to communicate. And they were saying that Dad and I don't communicate well. And I was like, yeah, speak for him. I think I communicate just fine. It just doesn't necessarily get me anywhere. And so then I sort of, that led on to a bit of a conversation with him. And it's interesting because he's on the spectrum. And we had this really cool, long conversation, twisting and turning conversation that I don't have with his dad. Kind of, you start off talking about this, it leads you to there, then you're over there, then you're up there, And so we start talking about what sort of things would be a deal breaker in your relationship if your partner did X, Y, Z. And he said it wouldn't be what his partner did, it would be what they didn't do. He said if they didn't listen to music or they didn't have music in their lives, then that would be a deal breaker. And I was like, yeah, I feel that one. And kind of cocks an eyebrow, like, what? Say what? Because music doesn't exist in my world much anyway. So that's what I'm getting at, masking. When I first met my partner, I walk into his house. He has an acoustic guitar, an electric guitar, an amp, a tower full of CDs, and it's mostly music that I like. He also had these CDs that were like romance, saxophone, type music you play when you're having a romantic dinner and such with your partner. And so I walk in and I'm thinking, cool, he's a muso, tick. He plays an instrument, tick. He's Mr. Romantic, tick. And then I get in the relationship with him and he barely touches the guitars, barely gets the CDs out to play them. And there were no romantic nights for the CDs to be playing at. So it was kind of like a stooge, Now, in his defense, he didn't realise he was masking. If you asked him, he would have said, I love music and I love playing the guitar. And the fact that I lived with him for 3 years and he probably only got his guitar out 3 times in that time. And the only time he listened to music was when I was sort of like instigating it and pushing it to happen. That's not you loving music. And it reminds me of the questionnaires that they ask to find out if you're on the spectrum. One of the questions is, would you prefer to stay home by yourself or have a gathering? And I'm watching him of course fill this questionnaire in, and he says he'd prefer to have a gathering. And I said to him, preference is based on what you do, not what you want. That's what they're trying to find out. Who are you now? Not who do you want to be, or who do you wish you were, or who are you going to pretend to be? And he says, I do prefer to have gatherings. And I said, well, judging by the fact that we have maybe one gathering a year and majority of your weekends are spent alone, you couldn't possibly prefer to have a gathering. That just doesn't make any sense. So in his mind, he thinks that because I don't mind gatherings, I prefer them. That's not what they're asking. And so this is the thing. In his case, he doesn't realise he's masking. He doesn't know that he's not being genuine. He doesn't know that he doesn't know himself. He thinks he knows himself well and has a good idea of himself, but yet all the evidence points to the contrary. So masking is when you're pretending to be something that you're not, and then you get in a relationship and that mask falls away and suddenly all the things you said you were don't occur. They never happened because it wasn't really who you were. And so I would suggest to any autistic person thinking of getting into a relationship to try to get real with yourself and ask yourself some really serious questions about who it is you genuinely are, and present that to the person that is taking an interest in you. And if you find that maybe it never works for you trying to get into a relationship because everybody you meet loves music and you hate it, well, you either have to learn to love it or still be genuine and tell the person you don't like it, because it wouldn't be fair to get in a relationship having claimed to love music and then you don't. So other areas of masking is when an autistic person gets in a relationship and they hate sex, or they hate kissing, or they hate hugging, but they'll pretend to do those things while they're courting, only to get into the throes of the relationship and stop. You'd be better off just saying, I don't like those things. And again, then if nobody wants to be in a relationship with you, maybe you have to question whether or not you're relationship ready. Because not everybody is going to fare well in a relationship. And I know, like, some people will be like, I really want to be in a relationship because it's what everybody does and yada yada. And I'm going to be good at it. That's my husband. Really thought he was going to be good at it. And then you get in the relationship only to find that you're not good at it and it's really hard. So other areas of masking are saying that you want children when you don't. That's a big one. Saying you want to get married and you don't. I mean, there's just so many things that people will say because they're part of life, and then they get in a relationship and the truth starts to come out. You'd just be better off being yourself, being open with yourself and open with your partner, not stooging them the way that I was stooged. Even though, as I said, my husband didn't mean to stooge me, he still stooged me, because we rarely listen to music. It's rarely a part of our world. He rarely touches musical instruments. And I feel blindsided because I wanted a life filled with music and gatherings and social activities and all these cool, fun things, and ended up with a man who spends, oh jeepers, 90% of his waking moments when he's not working on TV, watching TV, not on TV. I'm in with the TV on. And that's the thing, like when I walk into his house and I see he's got all that music equipment and stereo and CDs, it never occurred to me that he watched a whack ton of sports. And I can't even remember. Did he even tell me how much he loved sports when we were recording? I have a feeling that he didn't, because I would have remembered that, because I hate sport. So if I was dating somebody who said they really love sport, I'm pretty sure that it would have been a big turn off for me. So I remember him telling me that he played tennis, because he did. He plays lots of sports. And when I say plays lots of sports, back then it was tennis, and he moved on something and something and something. So all the time that I've known him, he's been quite physical. So he told me he played sports, tennis. He told me he'd been in a few newspapers because his shots were that good and yada yada. He was a budding tennis, potentially a professional, but didn't quite make it. But anyway, he never said that he loved sports and that it was all that he did and that it was all that he watched. And when I moved in with him, I was just going to be sitting there with him watching a whack ton of sports, and that was my life. Never said that. I wished he had, because he could have easily have found somebody who was far more suitable. That being said, it's also, a bit of an onus on me, because once I realised he was a sports fanatic, I probably should have really questioned my commitment and whether or not this was the relationship that I wanted. But once I'd lived with him for 3 years, I felt too invested, so that's my bad, because I probably should have pulled the plug at that point in time, but I didn't, and here we are. Anyway, so that's masking. I strongly suggest if you're on the spectrum, you be yourself, you be genuine, you tell them really who you are. Don't lie, don't falsify the documentation. Don't try to make yourself look good on paper and then not be good in real life. Be genuine if you want a partner. Like my son, he's all like, that person's got to be interested in music. It'd be really annoying for her if she gets in a relationship with him and he barely has anything to do with music. So hopefully he does fare better than his dad and I did. Hopefully all of my children fare better than we have. I'm hoping that they're learning from our mistakes, although I don't really think they know what our mistakes are. I don't really think they understand the intricacies of the relationship. But anyway, I do hope that they fare better. I do want, the world for them. I don't want them to have what I have, and that is that big, gigantic emptiness because the person I thought I was getting in a relationship with doesn't actually exist. But anyway, over to you. Can you relate? Feel free to drop a comment below, and thank you for taking the time to watch this video.